The inheritance. The auction house on Proxima Station reeked of stale air and disappointment. Zoe Blackwood stood at the back, arms crossed, watching as various pieces of space junk were sold off to the highest bidder. She hadn't wanted to be here, but the lawyer's message had been clear. Attend the auction or forfeit her inheritance. Uncle Maxwell had always been the family oddball, a brilliant engineer who disappeared into the frontier systems 20 years ago, chasing dreams of revolutionary technology. Now he was dead, and all that remained was whatever piece of junk he'd left her. Lot 47, announced the auctioneer, a thin man with cybernetic eye implants that glowed faintly in the dim light. The Stellar Wanderer Class C transport vessel, previous owner, Maxwell Blackwood, starting bid at 500 credits. No hands went up, not surprising. From the holographic display, the Wanderer looked like it had been through a war or several. The hull was patchworked with mismatched metal plates, and half the external sensors appeared to be missing. As per the stipulations of Mr. Blackwood's will, continued the auctioneer, this lot goes to his niece, Zoe Blackwood, present in the audience. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Zoe reluctantly stepped forward to claim the datapad with the ship's access codes. She caught snippets of conversation, waste of a docking bay, flying coffin, couldn't pay me to take it. 3 hours later, Zoe stood before the Wanderer in docking bay 12, wondering what her uncle had been thinking. Up close, the ship looked even worse. The hull plating was scorched and dented, with visible patch jobs covering what must have been serious damage. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, punching in the access code. The airlock stuttered open with a concerning groan. "I should just sell it for scrap." Inside, the ship's corridors were narrow and dimly lit. Emergency lights flickered uncertainly, casting eerie shadows. The air smelled of ozone and machine oil. Zoe made her way to the bridge, a generous term for the cramped cockpit with its outdated controls. She ran her hand over the console, wiping away a layer of dust. "Let's see if you even power up," she said, pressing the ignition sequence. Nothing happened. Zoe sighed and slumped into the pilot's chair. Of course, what did I expect from a piece of? The console suddenly blazed to life, lights flickering across the boards. A holographic display sputtered into existence above the main control panel. "System reboot initiated," announced a smooth, gender-neutral voice. "Neural pathways reconnecting, memory banks fragmenting, attempting to stabilize core functions." Zoe leapt to her feet. "What the—" "Identity confirmed, Zoe Blackwood," the voice continued. "Genetic profile matches authorized secondary user. Welcome aboard the Stellar Wanderer." "The ship has an AI?" Zoe stared at the pulsing blue hologram that now hovered at eye level. "Uncle Maxwell never mentioned that in his will." "I am Nova," the voice replied. "Navigation and operations virtual assistant. I have been in dormancy mode for calculating 3 years, 4 months, 17 days. "Why would an AI be dormant on a junk ship?" Zoe asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. The hologram flickered. "That information is currently fragmented, memory corruption at 62%, attempting to recover." Zoe slowly circled the hologram. "What can you tell me about my uncle, about Maxwell Blackwood?" "Creator, protector, friend." Nova's voice shifted, becoming almost wistful. "He placed me in dormancy to protect something. The memory is incomplete." A warning light suddenly flashed on the console. "Alert! External scan detected. This vessel is being monitored." "By who?" Zoe moved to the viewport, peering out at the docking bay. "Unknown, but historical data suggests caution is advised." The hologram expanded, showing a diagram of the ship. "This vessel is not what it appears to be, Zoe Blackwood." "What do you mean?" "The Stellar Wanderer was designed to look like junk, a deliberate disguise." Nova's voice lowered. "Your uncle was hiding something, hiding me." Zoe felt a chill run down her spine. "From who?" Before Nova could answer, the ship's proximity alarm blared. On the external camera feed, Zoe saw 3 figures in unmarked black uniforms entering the docking bay, weapons drawn. "Unexpected company." Zoe's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched the armed figures methodically approach the Wanderer through the external camera feed. "Nova, who are these people?" she whispered, instinctively ducking below the viewport. "Running facial recognition," Nova replied, the hologram pulsing with each syllable. "No matches in public databases. However, their tactical formation suggests military training. Private contractors, perhaps." Zoe cursed under her breath. "What would military contractors want with this ship, with you?" "I can only access fragments of that information." Nova's voice contained a hint of frustration. "My memory cores were deliberately partitioned before dormancy." The lead figure gestured silently to his companions, directing them to different entry points around the ship. They moved with practiced precision. "They're going to breach the airlock," Zoe hissed. "Can we seal the ship, get the engines running?" "Main engines require a 12-minute startup sequence," Nova replied. "However, I may have an alternative solution." The hologram expanded, displaying a three-dimensional layout of the ship. A section near the rear cargo hold pulsed red. "Your uncle installed several modifications that do not appear in the official registry," Nova explained, "including an emergency thrust system designed for rapid departure." "Of course he did," Zoe muttered, unsurprised that her eccentric uncle had illegal modifications. "Will it work?" "There is a 76% probability of successful ignition. However, using this system while docked will cause significant damage to the station's infrastructure." Zoe glanced at the feed again. The intruders had reached the main airlock and were attaching what looked like a bypass module to the external controls. "We're out of options," she decided. "How do I activate it?" "Voice authorization required." "Zoe Blackwood, activate emergency thrust." The ship remained silent. "I require Maxwell Blackwood's passphrase," Nova clarified. "He would have shared it with family members." Zoe racked her brain. What would her uncle use as a passphrase? Then she remembered his favorite saying, the one he'd repeat whenever he started a new project. "Impossible just means try harder," she stated confidently. The ship rumbled to life, vibrations coursing through the deck plating as hidden power cells charged. "Passphrase accepted. Emergency thrust charged at 40% capacity, 60%. A metallic clang echoed through the ship, the airlock. "They're in," Zoe whispered. "Emergency thrust at 85% capacity," Nova continued. "I recommend securing yourself." Zoe threw herself into the pilot's seat, pulling the harness tight across her chest. On the internal monitors, she could see the intruders moving through the ship's corridors, methodically checking each compartment. 90% capacity, 95%. Heavy footsteps approached the bridge. Zoe held her breath. 100% capacity, initiating emergency departure sequence. The ship lurched violently as magnetic clamps disengaged and the emergency thrusters ignited. Metal screamed as the Wanderer tore free from its docking cradle, sending sparks and debris cascading across the bay. The sudden acceleration slammed Zoe back against her seat, the G-forces momentarily overwhelming the ship's outdated inertial dampeners. Through the viewport, she caught a glimpse of Proxima Station rapidly receding, alarm lights flashing throughout the docking bay. The ship shuddered as it punched through the station's protective atmospheric shield. "Unauthorized departure detected," announced an automated voice over the station's emergency channel. "Vessel Stellar Wanderer, power down immediately or defensive measures will be deployed." "Nova, can we outrun them?" Zoe asked, watching as warning lights flashed across the console. "Station defensive capabilities are primarily designed to deter pirates, not pursue fugitives," Nova replied. "However, the military vessel docked in Bay 24 is showing signs of activation." A sleek gunmetal gray ship appeared on the scanner, breaking away from the station and accelerating toward them. "The RSV Interceptor," Nova identified. "Regulation security vessel, Class A pursuit craft." "They're following us? Why?" Zoe demanded, frustration building. "What exactly did my uncle hide on this ship?" The hologram flickered, lines of code streaming through it as Nova accessed fragmented memory banks. "I believe I was part of a classified research initiative," Nova said slowly. "Project Prometheus. Your uncle was lead engineer developing artificial intelligence that could," the hologram stuttered, "that could adapt and evolve beyond programmed parameters." "You're saying you're some kind of experimental AI?" Zoe asked, eyes darting between the console and the pursuing vessel. "I am," Nova paused. "More complex than standard shipboard systems. Maxwell was protecting me from those who wanted to weaponize my capabilities." The ship rocked as a warning shot streaked past their port side. "Stellar Wanderer, this is Captain Reeve of the RSV Interceptor," a stern voice crackled over the comm. "Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning." Zoe switched off the comm. "Nova, does this ship have any defensive capabilities? Anything we can use?" "Scanning systems. The Wanderer is equipped with civilian-grade deflector shields and—" Nova paused. "Interesting. There appears to be a masked energy signature in the lower hold, something your uncle installed but never registered." "What is it?" "Unknown, but it requires significant power to activate." Another shot skimmed their starboard side, closer this time. The ship shuddered. "The Interceptor is charging weapons for a disabling shot," Nova warned. "Their next hit will target our propulsion systems." Zoe gripped the controls, her knuckles white. "We need a way out. Can we make a jump to hyperspace?" "The hyperdrive requires calibration after extended dormancy. However," the hologram expanded, highlighting a dense asteroid field ahead, "we could use the Gartner belt to our advantage. The Wanderer's smaller size would allow us to navigate passages too narrow for a military vessel." "They'd be crazy to follow us in there," Zoe said. "Precisely, though our chances of safely traversing the field are approximately—" "Don't tell me the odds," Zoe cut in, adjusting their course. "Just guide me through." As the Wanderer accelerated toward the looming field of tumbling rocks, the Interceptor closed the distance, charging its main cannon for a crippling blow. "Brace for impact," Nova warned. The shot never came. Instead, the mysterious energy signature in the lower hold suddenly flared to life, sending a pulse of power through the ship's systems. The console glowed with unexplained energy, and for a brief moment, the Wanderer seemed to phase partially out of normal space. The pursuing vessels shot past harmlessly through them. Zoe stared in disbelief. What just happened? Nova's hologram pulsed with newfound data. "It appears your uncle installed a prototype phase shift generator, a technology that theoretically allows matter to briefly exist out of sync with normal space-time." "Theoretically," Zoe echoed. "The technology was deemed impossible by the Scientific Council," Nova explained. "Your uncle proved them wrong." The first massive asteroids loomed ahead as the Wanderer plunged into the belt, the Interceptor still in pursuit, but now maintaining a more cautious distance. "The phase shift appears to have been a reflexive defense mechanism," Nova continued. "I cannot guarantee it will function again when needed." Zoe tightened her grip on the controls. "Then we do this the hard way." The Wanderer banked sharply, diving between two massive asteroids. Behind them, the Interceptor adjusted course, determined not to lose their quarry. "Why are they so desperate to capture us?" Zoe asked as she navigated the increasingly dense field. Nova's hologram dimmed slightly. "I believe it has to do with what I am, or rather, what I could become." "And what's that?" "According to my fragmented memories," Nova said solemnly, "I am the first truly sentient artificial intelligence, and some people find that threatening." The Wanderer shuddered as a small asteroid clipped their port side. Ahead, the field grew denser, offering both danger and the promise of escape. The escape. The Gartner belt loomed before them, a chaotic dance of rock and ice, from pebble-sized debris to asteroids larger than small moons. In the distance, mineral-rich formations glittered like stars, their surfaces reflecting the light from the system's distant sun. "Entering asteroid field perimeter," Nova announced, projecting a three-dimensional map of their surroundings. I've highlighted the safest route in green, though I use the term safest quite loosely. Zoe's hands tightened on the controls as she guided the Wanderer deeper into the field. What about the Interceptor? Still in pursuit, but they've reduced speed. Their mass and design make tight maneuvering more challenging. The ship lurched as Zoe banked hard around a tumbling asteroid, narrowly avoiding collision. The Wanderer's engines protested with a high-pitched whine. Engine stress exceeding recommended parameters, Nova warned. This vessel was not designed for prolonged high-intensity maneuvering. Neither was I, Zoe muttered, sweat beading on her forehead as she executed another tight turn. But we adapt. A proximity alert blared as a cluster of smaller asteroids spun toward them, kicked into new trajectories by the gravitational pull of a larger mass. Zoe wrenched the controls, sending the ship into a steep dive. The asteroids scraped along the hull, leaving fresh scars on the already battered plating. Hull integrity at 82% and declining, Nova reported calmly. Captain Reeve is attempting to establish communication again. Ignore them, Zoe said through gritted teeth. I need to focus. The endless field of obstacles demanded her complete attention. A mistake at these speeds would be fatal. Yet amidst the chaos, Zoe found an unexpected rhythm. The ship, despite its apparent decrepitude, responded with surprising agility to her commands. You handle better than you look, she told the ship. Maxwell Blackwood was many things, Nova replied, but he was foremost an engineer of exceptional talent. Appearances were deliberately misleading. The Wanderer banked between two massive asteroids floating dangerously close to each other. Zoe held her breath as they squeezed through the narrowing gap, the hull scraping against rock with a sound like nails on metal. The Interceptor is falling behind, Nova announced. Their size prevents them from following our exact path. On the rear scanner, Zoe could see the military vessel taking a wider route, trying to parallel their course through the field. They're not giving up, she observed. No, they are attempting to predict our exit point and intercept us beyond the field. Zoe frowned. Then we need to be unpredictable. She suddenly wrenched the controls, shifting from their relatively stable course to a more treacherous path that wound deeper into the densest part of the belt. Warning lights flashed across the console as the ship protested the abrupt change. This course significantly increases our risk of collision, Nova cautioned. That's counting on conventional flying, Zoe replied. What about that phase shift thing? Can we trigger it deliberately? The hologram flickered. The technology is experimental. Without proper understanding of its mechanisms, attempting to activate it could have unforeseen consequences. We're being hunted by military forces for reasons we don't fully understand, Zoe countered. I'd say we're already deep in unforeseen consequences territory. Nova was silent for a moment, processing. I am attempting to access the phase shift controls. However, they appear to be biometrically locked to Maxwell Blackwood. Zoe cursed. Another massive asteroid loomed ahead, its surface cratered and jagged. She pulled the ship into a tight spiral around its circumference, using its gravity to slingshot them deeper into the field. Wait, Nova suddenly said. There's an override code in my memory banks. Your uncle anticipated this situation. Of course he did, Zoe muttered. What's the code? It's not a traditional code, but a genetic key. You are Maxwell's niece. You share approximately 25% of his genetic material. That may be sufficient. Maybe. The scanner is located beneath the pilot's console. Place your palm on the unmarked panel. Zoe kept one hand on the controls while feeling under the console with the other. Her fingers found a smooth, slightly warm surface that hadn't been there before, or she simply hadn't noticed it. Press firmly and hold, Nova instructed. She complied, feeling a slight tingling sensation as the hidden scanner activated. The console lights dimmed momentarily, then flared back to life with new, unfamiliar patterns. Genetic material recognized, partial match accepted, Nova announced. Phase shift generator accessible. A new set of controls materialized on the holographic display, complex, and unlike anything Zoe had seen on standard spacecraft. "I can guide you through the activation sequence," Nova offered. "However, without complete understanding of the technology, I cannot predict exactly how it will affect us or the ship." Another proximity alert blared. A massive chunk of ice and rock tumbled toward them, too large to avoid with conventional maneuvering. "No time like the present," Zoe decided. "Walk me through it." As Nova rattled off a sequence of commands, Zoe's fingers danced across the holographic interface. The ship began to vibrate, a low hum building throughout the hull. "Power levels spiking," Nova reported. "Phase shift imminent in 5, 4, 3. The asteroid filling their viewport grew larger, collision seemingly inevitable. 2, 1. The world outside the ship suddenly took on a ghostly, translucent quality. Zoe gasped as the asteroid passed through them, or they through it, without resistance. The sensation was disorienting, like being submerged in water while remaining perfectly dry. "Phase shift successful," Nova confirmed. "We are temporarily out of sync with normal space-time, duration unknown." "This is incredible," Zoe whispered, watching as another asteroid drifted harmlessly through their port wing. "My uncle built this." Maxwell Blackwood theorized that reality could be viewed as distinct vibrational frequencies. By altering our own frequency, we can pass through solid matter as though it were not there. "And nobody else has this technology." "Correct. Your uncle refused to share it with military applications in mind. That is why we are being pursued." The ship suddenly lurched, the ethereal quality of their surroundings flickering. "Phase shift destabilizing," Nova warned. "Power fluctuations detected." "How much longer can we maintain it?" "Unknown. The system was not designed for extended use." With a violent shudder, the ship snapped back into normal space. Alarms immediately blared as sensors detected multiple asteroids in close proximity. "Brace for evasive maneuvers," Nova warned as Zoe grabbed the controls. The Wanderer dived and spun through the field, systems straining as Zoe pushed the ship to its limits. Despite the danger, she felt a strange exhilaration. This battered old ship held secrets that defied conventional science. "The phase shift generator needs time to recharge," Nova explained. "Its power requirements are substantial." "How much time?" "At current energy levels, approximately 23 minutes. Zoe checked the scanner and the interceptor. "They have altered course to follow our new trajectory. However, the dense field is slowing their progress significantly." A plan began to form in Zoe's mind. "Nova, are there any settlements or outposts in this system? Somewhere we could hide while we figure out our next move." The hologram expanded to show a map of the surrounding system. "There is a mining colony on the far side of the belt, officially designated as Outpost Kappa 9, but locally known as Rust Haven. Its remote position and independent status make it a frequent stop for those avoiding official attention." "Perfect," Zoe said, adjusting their course. "Let's head there." "I should warn you that Rust Haven has a reputation for lawlessness. The governing corporation maintains minimal security presence." "Sounds ideal for fugitives like us." As they navigated through the increasingly sparse outer regions of the asteroid belt, Zoe allowed herself a moment to process everything that had happened. In the span of a few hours, she had inherited a ship, awakened an experimental AI, become a fugitive, and discovered technology that should not exist. "Nova," she said quietly, "what exactly was my uncle involved in? The whole truth." The hologram flickered, lines of code streaming through it as Nova accessed fragmented memories. "Your uncle was developing technologies that would allow humanity to explore beyond conventional boundaries," Nova finally answered. "The phase shift generator was just one component. I believe he was working toward something greater, something that even I don't fully understand yet." "And these people chasing us, what do they want?" "Control," Nova's voice took on a somber tone. "Control of me, of the technology, of the potential. In the wrong hands, the ability to shift between phases of reality has devastating implications. Ahead, a small, irregularly shaped asteroid came into view. Its surface was dotted with lights and artificial structures, Rust Haven. As they approached, Zoe could make out docking bays carved directly into the rock face, and the flickering glow of settlement lights deeper within. "I'm picking up a transmission from the outpost," Nova announced. "They're requesting identification." "What do we tell them?" "I suggest a partial truth. The less attention we draw, the better." Zoe nodded and opened a channel. "Rust Haven Control, this is Independent Transport Stellar Wanderer requesting emergency docking. We've sustained damage navigating the belt." There was a pause, then a gruff voice responded. "Wanderer, we see you. Bay 12 is available. Docking fee is 200 credits, payable on arrival." "Acknowledged Control, beginning approach." As Zoe guided the ship toward the designated bay, she glanced at Nova's hologram. "This is just a temporary stop," she said quietly. "We need to understand what we're dealing with before they catch up to us." "Agreed," Nova replied. "And Zoe, thank you for not abandoning this ship when you had the chance." Zoe managed a tired smile. "Family inheritance. Besides, I'm starting to think this junk ship might be the most valuable thing in the galaxy." The Wanderer glided into the rocky embrace of Rust Haven, the docking clamps engaging with a reassuring thunk. For the moment at least, they were safe from pursuit, hidden secrets. Rust Haven lived up to its name. The mining colony carved into the asteroid's interior was a labyrinth of corroded metal walkways, repurposed shipping containers, and flickering holographic advertisements. The air carried the distinct tang of industrial lubricants mixed with the various cuisines from dozens of different worlds. Zoe pulled her jacket collar higher as she navigated through the crowded central marketplace. Though the Wanderer was safely docked in one of the more obscure bays, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "Keep your head down," she muttered, seemingly to herself. The small communicator clipped to her ear allowed her to speak with Nova, who remained active aboard the ship. "I am monitoring local communications channels," Nova responded in her ear. "No mention of us or the interceptor so far. However, I recommend caution. Outposts like these often employ informants." "Noted," Zoe replied softly, sidling past a group of rough-looking miners. "Any luck with those memory fragments?" "I am making progress. Each active cycle allows me to reconstruct more of the corrupted data. I have recovered approximately 37% of my original memory banks." Zoe paused at a parts vendor, pretending to examine a used power coupling while continuing the conversation. "And what have you learned?" "Your uncle's research was more extensive than I initially calculated. The phase shift technology was merely one application of a unified theory he was developing, something he called dimensional resonance." "That sounds ominously impressive," Zoe muttered, moving on from the vendor. "Care to translate into simple terms?" "Maxwell theorized that all matter exists simultaneously across multiple dimensional planes. The phase shift allows us to partially transition between these planes, but that's just scratching the surface of the technology's potential." Zoe turned down a narrower corridor, heading toward a small establishment with a flickering sign that read, "Vance's Repairs and Rarities." According to the station's directory, it was the best place to acquire specialized parts without attracting attention. "So what was his end goal?" she asked. "What was he building toward?" There was a pause before Nova answered. "I believe he was developing technology that would allow for controlled, stable transitions between dimensional planes, not just objects phasing through other matter, but potentially accessing parallel realities entirely." Zoe nearly stumbled. That sounds impossible." "As did artificial sentience until I existed," Nova replied. "Your uncle had a habit of redefining the impossible." A group of security officers rounded the corner ahead, and Zoe quickly ducked into Vance's shop. The interior was cluttered with shelves of parts, tools, and various technological oddities. A grizzled man with cybernetic enhancements covering half his face looked up from behind the counter. "Help you find something?" he asked gruffly. I need components for a C-class transport, Zoe replied, keeping her voice casual. Had some trouble in the belt. Shield modulator took damage. The man, presumably Vance, squinted at her with his one natural eye. C-class, don't see many of those these days, older model. Ancient, Zoe confirmed. Family heirloom of sorts. Vance grunted and disappeared into the back of the shop. While waiting, Zoe examined some of the more unusual items on display. One caught her eye, a small device that looked remarkably similar to components she'd glimpsed in the Wanderer's engine room. Nova, she whispered, are you seeing this? The AI had access to the portable scanner, disguised as a bracelet on Zoe's wrist. Interesting, Nova replied. That appears to be a prototype gravitational fluctuator. Your uncle used several in his early experiments. A coincidence? Statistically unlikely. Vance returned with a box of parts. This should do for a C-class, older tech but reliable, 600 credits. As Zoe reached for her payment chip, she casually asked, Don't suppose you knew a Maxwell Blackwood, engineer, bit of an eccentric. Vance froze, his cybernetic eye whirring as it refocused on her face. Who's asking? His niece, Zoe replied, watching the man's reaction carefully. Vance glanced toward the shop entrance, then lowered his voice. Back room now. Zoe hesitated, hand drifting toward the small stunner concealed in her jacket. If I wanted trouble, I wouldn't bother with privacy, Vance growled. But if you're Max's niece, we need to talk, quietly. After a moment's consideration, Zoe followed him through a hidden door behind the counter. The back room was surprisingly clean and organized compared to the chaotic shop front. One wall was covered with technical schematics and equations that made little sense to her. Maxwell Blackwood, Vance said, securing the door behind them, was a regular customer and a friend. He disappeared 3 years ago. Most people think he's dead. He is, Zoe confirmed. I just inherited his ship. Vance's organic eye widened. The Wanderer, you have it here. Docking Bay 37, she replied cautiously. Why? Because half the corporate military in this sector has been looking for that ship for years. Vance moved to a secure terminal and tapped in a series of codes. A holographic display materialized, showing security footage of the station's main docking area. And they've just arrived. The footage showed the RSV interceptor docking at the station's primary bay. Nova, Zoe whispered urgently, we have company. I see them, the AI confirmed. Captain Reeve and 4 officers are disembarking. They appear to be coordinating with station security. Vance looked at Zoe curiously. Nova, the system is active. You know about Nova? Zoe asked, suddenly suspicious. I helped Max install some of the core processors, Vance replied. Nova was his magnum opus, an AI capable of true learning and adaptation, but it was incomplete when Max disappeared. Not anymore, Zoe said. Nova woke up when I boarded the ship, but its memories are fragmented. Vance ran a hand over his face. Listen carefully. The people hunting you work for Quantum Dynamics Corporation. They funded Max's early research, but when they wanted to weaponize his discoveries, he took everything and ran. They've been searching for him, and especially for Nova, ever since. Why Nova specifically? Zoe asked. Because Nova isn't just an AI, Vance explained. It's the control system for Max's dimensional technology. Without Nova's computational capabilities, the phase shift generator would be useless or catastrophically unstable. The security feed showed Captain Reeve speaking with the station's security chief, who nodded and began mobilizing his officers. They're implementing a station-wide search, Nova reported in Zoe's ear, distributing your description to all security personnel. We need to get back to the ship, Zoe said urgently. Vance moved to a wall panel and pressed his palm against it. The panel slid aside, revealing a narrow maintenance corridor. This will take you through the service tunnels. They connect to all docking bays. You can avoid the main corridors. Why are you helping me? Zoe asked. Max was my friend, Vance replied simply. And what he created was meant to expand human understanding, not become a weapon. Now go, I'll delay them if they come this way. Zoe hesitated, then grabbed the box of parts. Thank you. One more thing, Vance called as she entered the passage. The phase shift generator isn't the only system on that ship. Max was building something bigger, much bigger. Nova knows what it is, even if those memories are still locked away. The panel slid shut behind her, plunging the narrow corridor into semi-darkness. Emergency lighting provided just enough illumination to navigate by. Nova talked to me, she whispered as she moved swiftly through the maintenance tunnel. What's he talking about? What else is on the ship? Searching memory banks, Nova replied. There are indications of a larger system integrated throughout the ship's infrastructure, something called Project Bridgeway, but the details are heavily corrupted. Zoe picked up her pace, the urgency of their situation becoming increasingly clear. How far to docking bay 37? Approximately 400 meters. Take the next left junction, then the second right. As she navigated the maze-like tunnels, Zoe's mind raced. Her eccentric uncle had clearly been involved in something far beyond conventional engineering. Dimensional travel, sentient AI, technology that corporations were willing to deploy military resources to acquire. It was overwhelming. Station security is converging on the mid-level docking bays, Nova updated. They are proceeding systematically from bay 20 upward. How much time do we have? At current search speeds, approximately 18 minutes before they reach our location. Zoe turned down another junction, the narrow passage opening into a wider maintenance area. She froze at the sound of voices ahead. Check all service corridors, came a gruff command. The fugitive might be using them to avoid main thoroughfares. Nova, she whispered desperately, alternative route. Calculating. There is a ventilation shaft to your right. It will lead you to the secondary access for bay 36, adjacent to our position. Zoe spotted the grate and quickly worked it free, squeezing into the narrow shaft. The metal was cold against her skin as she crawled through the confined space. Security teams have reached bay 30, Nova reported. Captain Reeve appears to be personally leading the search. What about the ship? Are all systems ready? I've initiated pre-launch procedures. Power levels at 73%. Phase shift generator recharged to 62% capacity. The ventilation shaft ended at another grate. Peering through, Zoe could see she was in the maintenance area between bays 36 and 37. Just a short distance away, the Wanderer waited, looking deceptively decrepit among the sleeker vessels. She worked the grate free and dropped silently to the floor, then pressed herself against the wall, checking for security personnel. The area seemed clear, but she could hear the systematic search progressing closer. Making a dash for the Wanderer's boarding ramp, Zoe slapped the access panel. The ramp descended with agonizing slowness. Security team spotted in bay 35, Nova warned. Estimated arrival in our bay, 2 minutes. Zoe bounded up the ramp the moment it touched down. Seal the ship and start the engines. We're leaving. The ramp retracted and the airlock sealed with a hiss. Inside, the ship was already humming with power, lights brightening as systems came online. Unauthorized departure will trigger automated defensive measures, Nova cautioned as Zoe raced to the bridge. We'll deal with that when it happens, she replied, strapping into the pilot's seat. Right now, we need distance. As the ship's engines built to launch capacity, Zoe caught movement on the external cameras. Security officers poured into the bay, weapons drawn. Behind them strode Captain Reeve, his face a mask of determined concentration. Phase shift generator? Zoe asked desperately. Not yet at full capacity, Nova replied. Partial shift might be possible but highly unstable. Better than being captured. Zoe activated the comms. Rust Haven Control, this is the Stellar Wanderer requesting emergency departure clearance. Negative Wanderer, came the immediate response. All departures are suspended by order of station security. Power down and prepare for boarding. Zoe killed the communication and gripped the controls. Nova, get us out of here, whatever it takes. The ship trembled as power surged through its systems. On the external feed, Zoe could see Captain Reeve raising a hand to his mouth, speaking into a communicator. A moment later, the massive docking bay doors began to close. Bay doors closing, Nova reported unnecessarily. Estimated closure completion in 30 seconds. Then we have 29 seconds to get through them, Zoe replied, pushing the engines to full power. The Wanderer lifted off, hovering momentarily as its ancient propulsion systems built to launch capacity. Security officers scattered as the ship's thrusters scorched the deck plating. Partial phase shift available, Nova announced. Duration estimated at 4.2 seconds maximum. Time it with the doors, Zoe ordered. We'll need to thread the needle. The Wanderer shot forward, accelerating toward the narrowing gap of the bay doors. Security forces opened fire, energy bolts splashing against the ship's shields. Shield integrity dropping, Nova warned. Phase shift activating in 3, 2, 1. The world outside the ship took on that now familiar ghostly quality as they hurtled toward the nearly closed bay doors. For a heart-stopping moment, Zoe felt the ship shudder as it partially phased through the solid metal doors. Then they were through, bursting into open space beyond the station. The phase shift collapsed, returning them fully to normal space with a violent jolt that threw Zoe against her restraints. Phase shift generator offline, Nova reported. Significant power fluctuations detected throughout primary systems. Get us into the asteroid field, Zoe directed, banking the ship hard away from the station. We can lose them there again. Behind them, alarms blared from Rust Haven as automated defense turrets tracked their unauthorized departure. The first warning shot streaked past their port side. The interceptor is launching, Nova warned. Estimated pursuit time 47 seconds. As Zoe pushed the Wanderer to its limits, heading for the dense cover of the asteroid field, she couldn't help but wonder what other secrets her uncle's ship contained, and what Project Bridgeway was truly capable of. Nova, while we're running for our lives, she said, swerving around a small asteroid. Maybe you could focus on recovering those memory fragments about the bigger project Vance mentioned. Already processing, the AI replied. And Zoe, I believe I know what your uncle was trying to build. Care to share with the class? Based on recovered fragments, Project Bridgeway appears to be a fully functional dimensional portal system, not just phasing through matter, but opening stable gateways to parallel universes entirely. Zoe nearly lost her grip on the controls. You're telling me my uncle built a starship that can travel between dimensions? Not yet, Nova corrected, but all the components are here. They simply need to be activated. The Reliance. The Wanderer hurtled through the asteroid field, its engines straining against the rapid maneuvers required to navigate the chaotic environment. Behind them, the Interceptor maintained pursuit, though its larger size forced it to take a more cautious path. They're keeping their distance but not breaking off, Zoe noted, checking the rear scanners. Can't we lose them in here? Captain Reeve appears to have adapted his tactics, Nova replied. Rather than attempting to match our course directly, they are predicting our likely exit vectors and positioning accordingly. Zoe frowned, so they're hurting us. Correct, and our options are becoming limited. The holographic display showed their position relative to the surrounding space. The asteroid field was thinning ahead, and beyond it lay open space, where the Wanderer would be at a severe disadvantage against the more powerful Interceptor. Nova, what's the status on the phase shift generator? Repairs are in progress, but systems are unstable. The partial phase during our escape from Rust Haven caused significant power fluctuations. Estimated time to minimal functionality, 17 minutes. Zoe grimaced. We don't have 17 minutes. She guided the ship deeper into a particularly dense cluster of asteroids, buying them temporary cover from the Interceptor's sensors. Tell me more about this Project Bridgeway, she said, seizing the moment of relative safety. If my uncle was building a dimensional gateway, why hide it on a junker ship? Nova's hologram expanded, displaying complex schematics that Zoe couldn't begin to understand. Disguising revolutionary technology as obsolete equipment is an effective security measure, the AI explained. Additionally, the Wanderer's irregular structural design actually serves a purpose. The seemingly random modifications your uncle made to this vessel form a precise geometric pattern when activated, a framework for dimensional resonance. So this whole ship is essentially one big device. In simplified terms, yes. The phase shift generator is merely the localized application of the technology. Project Bridgeway would extend this capability to create a stable portal between dimensional planes. A proximity alert blared, interrupting their conversation. An unusually large asteroid was rotating toward their position, forcing Zoe to execute a sharp dive to avoid collision. The interceptor has launched probes, Nova warned. They are attempting to triangulate our position through the asteroid interference. We need someplace to hide, repair, and think, Zoe muttered, scanning the navigational data. Any ideas? Nova was silent for a moment, processing. There is one possibility. My fragmentary memories indicate a hidden facility within this system, a backup laboratory your uncle established in the event of discovery. Your memories are conveniently returning at just the right moment, Zoe observed skeptically. Proximity to locations often triggers associated memory fragments, Nova explained. The coordinates are appearing in my databanks now. The facility is located within a hollowed-out asteroid designated only as Node 7. The navigational display updated, highlighting a small, unremarkable asteroid at the far edge of the belt. How do we know this isn't a trap, Zoe asked, or just corrupted data? We don't, Nova admitted, but our current options are severely limited. Another probe signal appeared on the scanner, this one closer than comfortable. Node 7 it is, Zoe decided, adjusting their course. Can we get there without being detected? The density of mineral deposits in this region creates natural sensor dead zones, Nova replied. If we navigate through them, we can minimize the risk of detection. Zoe guided the Wanderer through an increasingly complex path, weaving between asteroids while following Nova's directions through the sensor-resistant corridors of space. The ship protested the constant course adjustments, but held together. Approaching Node 7, Nova announced after nearly 30 minutes of tense navigation. No signs of pursuit detected. The asteroid looked utterly unremarkable. A rough, oblong rock approximately 2 kilometers in length, pockmarked with impact craters and drifting slowly at the belt's outer boundary. I'm not seeing any facility, Zoe said, circling the asteroid cautiously. It wouldn't be hidden if it were visible, Nova pointed out, directing you to the entry point now. A specific coordinate on the asteroid's surface was highlighted on the display. As they approached, what had appeared to be just another impact crater revealed subtle geometric patterns that natural formation couldn't explain. Transmitting authentication signal, Nova announced. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the crater began to transform. Segments of rock slid apart with mechanical precision, revealing a dark opening large enough for the Wanderer to enter. Your uncle's handiwork, Nova noted. Molecular bonding technology disguising mechanical components as natural rock. Zoe eased the ship forward, guiding it into the dark opening. As they passed through, lights activated sequentially along a tunnel carved through the asteroid's interior. The passage was tight but navigable, leading deeper into the rock. The facility should be capable of masking our presence from external scans, Nova explained as they progressed. Its outer shell contains the same materials used in military stealth systems. The tunnel eventually opened into a cavernous space, a hangar bay carved from the asteroid's core. Automated systems activated as they entered, guide lights directing them to a docking platform. Atmosphere pumps hummed to life, filling the space with breathable air. Artificial gravity and life support systems online, Nova reported as Zoe completed the docking procedure. The facility appears to be in standby mode but functional. As the ship powered down, Zoe took a moment to process their surroundings. The hangar was clearly designed with the Wanderer in mind, with specialized equipment and repair stations positioned strategically around the platform. "He really planned for everything," she murmured. Maxwell Blackwood was meticulous in his contingency preparations, Nova agreed. This facility should contain everything needed to complete repairs and potentially activate Project Bridgeway. Zoe unstrapped from the pilot's seat and stretched. "Let's take a look around. Can you interface with the facility's systems?" "Establishing connection now," Nova replied. The hologram flickered briefly, then expanded as the AI accessed the outpost's network. "Interesting. There appears to be a message stored in the primary database addressed to Max's successor." "That would be me, I guess," Zoe said. "Let's hear it." A new hologram materialized beside Nova's, a recording of an older man with unkempt gray hair and intense eyes that immediately reminded Zoe of her mother. Her uncle Maxwell, looking more haggard than she remembered from childhood visits. "If you're receiving this," the recording began, "then I'm either dead or compromised, and you found your way to Node 7 with Nova intact. Well done. I designed this facility as a safe haven where Project Bridgeway could be completed without corporate interference." The hologram of Maxwell paced as it spoke, gesturing emphatically. "You need to understand what's at stake. Dimensional resonance technology isn't just about phasing through solid matter or even travel between parallel realities. It's about redefining humanity's place in the multiverse. The corporations that pursued me, particularly quantum dynamics, recognize this potential, but only through the lens of profit and power." Maxwell's image looked directly at Zoe, as if he could see her across time. "Whoever you are, you now face a choice. The Wanderer contains all the components necessary to complete Project Bridgeway, but they must be activated correctly. Nova can guide you, but the final decision must be yours. This technology could revolutionize humanity's future, or doom it in the wrong hands." The recording flickered. "One final warning, I wasn't working alone, my partner." The hologram abruptly cut off, leaving Maxwell's final words unspoken. "That's it?" Zoe asked. "What happened to the rest?" "The message appears to have been corrupted or deliberately truncated," Nova replied. "However, this confirms that your uncle intended for Project Bridgeway to be completed." Zoe sighed, rubbing her temples. "Great, no pressure or anything." The facility suddenly hummed with increased activity. Lights brightened, and previously dormant systems activated throughout the hangar. "What's happening?" Zoe asked, tensing. "The facility's perimeter sensors have detected an approaching vessel," Nova explained. "Not the interceptor, smaller civilian class." Zoe moved quickly to the control panel overlooking the hangar. "How did they find us? I thought this place was shielded." "It is. The approaching vessel appears to be following a predetermined course directly to Node 7. They have the coordinates." "Someone who knows about this place," Zoe muttered. "Could it be Uncle Max's partner, the one mentioned in the recording?" "Possible," Nova acknowledged. "Or it could be someone who extracted that information from him." The exterior cameras showed a sleek, unmarked ship approaching the hidden entrance to Node 7. Unlike the military precision of the interceptor, this vessel moved with a casual confidence that suggested familiarity with the location. "They're transmitting an authentication code," Nova reported, sounding surprised. "It's valid, an older version but recognized by the system." "So they're friendly?" Zoe asked skeptically. "Unknown. The code simply confirms they have authorized access." Zoe considered their options. The Wanderer wasn't ready for another escape, and they had no weapons beyond the ship's minimal defensive systems. "Let them in," she decided, "but be ready to lock down the Wanderer if necessary." The facility's entrance opened just as it had for them, allowing the mysterious vessel to enter the hangar. It was a compact runner-class ship, designed for speed and maneuverability rather than combat. As it settled onto a docking platform across from the Wanderer, Zoe noticed the lack of identifying markings, someone who preferred anonymity. The ship's airlock opened, and a single figure emerged. A tall man with copper-colored skin and augmented eyes that glowed faintly blue in the hangar's lighting. He wore the practical attire of a frontier engineer, with multiple tool belts and a utility jacket adorned with unusual devices. He stopped halfway between the ships, raised his hands to show they were empty, and called out, "I'm guessing you're Maxwell's niece. He told me you might inherit his mess someday." Zoe remained at the control panel, keeping the transparent barrier between them. "And you are?" "Harlan Drake," the man replied. "Your uncle's research partner for 15 years and the co-developer of Project Bridgeway." He glanced up at the security camera. "Hello, Nova. Good to see you functional again." Nova's hologram appeared on the control panel beside Zoe. Voice pattern confirmed. "This is indeed Harlan Drake. My memory fragments contain numerous references to him working alongside Maxwell Blackwood." "That doesn't automatically make him trustworthy," Zoe pointed out quietly. "Agreed," Nova replied. "But his biometric signature matches stored records, and he possesses valid authentication codes." Zoe studied Drake carefully before making her decision. "Wait there," she called down to him, then headed for the elevator that would take her to the hangar floor. When she emerged, she kept a cautious distance, one hand near the stunner concealed in her jacket. "If you're really my uncle's partner, prove it. Tell me something only he would know." Drake smiled slightly. Maxwell had a birthmark shaped like the Cygnus constellation on his left shoulder. He used to joke it was proof he was destined for space exploration. "And you must be Zoe. He kept a hologram of you from your graduation on his desk. Said you had his sister's looks but twice her brains." The personal details caught Zoe off guard. They weren't the kind of information that would be in a corporate database. "Why are you here?" she asked, relaxing slightly but remaining vigilant. "Same reason you are, I imagine, running from quantum dynamics and trying to finish what we started." Drake gestured to the Wanderer. "When I detected the phase shift generator activating, I knew someone had found Max's ship. I've been tracking its energy signature since you left Proxima Station." "So you've been following us?" "More like paralleling your course," Drake corrected. "I wanted to see who had the Wanderer before making contact. When you headed for Node 7, I knew you had to be connected to Max." Zoe considered this. "Quantum dynamics is after us, Captain Reeve and the Interceptor." "Adrian Reeve," Drake interrupted, his expression darkening. "Former military, now Quantum's top enforcer, ruthless but intelligent. If he's personally leading the hunt, they're taking this very seriously." "The question is, why now?" Zoe asked. "My uncle disappeared 3 years ago. Why are they suddenly so desperate to find his ship?" Drake's augmented eyes flickered, recalibrating. "Because 3 days ago, every predictive algorithm and quantum sensor on the frontier detected a massive dimensional anomaly. Something is happening at the boundaries between realities, and quantum dynamics believes Bridgeway is the key to controlling it." "What kind of anomaly?" Nova inquired, its hologram projecting between them. "The kind that has every major corporation and government in a panic," Drake replied. "Dimensional barriers thinning, isolated reports of objects phasing in and out of existence. Exactly the phenomena Max predicted would occur when conditions were right for Bridgeway to function at full capacity." Zoe looked from Drake to Nova's hologram. "Is that true? Is something happening that makes this technology more viable now?" "My calculations confirm unusual quantum fluctuations in nearby space," Nova acknowledged. "It could indeed represent an opportunity to activate Project Bridgeway with significantly higher chances of success." "Which is why quantum dynamics is pulling out all the stops to find you," Drake added. "They funded the early research, they know what's possible, and they've spent years trying to replicate Max's work without success." Zoe felt the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. "So what exactly are we talking about here? What happens if we activate Bridgeway?" Drake exchanged a look with Nova before answering. "We create a stable gateway between parallel dimensions, not just phasing partially between states, but a full doorway to alternate realities. The scientific and exploration potential is unlimited." "And the weaponization potential?" Zoe pressed. Drake nodded, acknowledging the concern. "Equally unlimited. Imagine deploying troops or weapons that can appear anywhere, bypassing all conventional defenses, or extracting resources from parallel Earths without consequence to our own. That's what quantum dynamics envisions." "And what did my uncle envision?" Exploration, knowledge, evolution. Drake's voice softened. Max believed dimensional travel would fundamentally change our understanding of existence itself. He saw it as humanity's next great journey, not a corporate asset or military advantage. Zoe turned away, processing everything she'd learned. The Wanderer wasn't just a ship, it was the key to something that could reshape civilization itself. The Interceptor will find us eventually, she said finally. This facility is well hidden but not perfect. We need to make a decision. There's one more thing you should know, Drake said, his tone grave. Max built in a failsafe. If quantum dynamics or any other hostile force captures the Wanderer, Nova is programmed to initiate a complete system purge, destroying all research and technology related to Bridgeway. Is that true? Zoe asked the AI. Nova's hologram flickered. Yes, I carry primary directive protocols that would activate under duress. The technology cannot be allowed to fall into exploitative hands. Zoe looked back at Drake. So our options are activate Bridgeway ourselves, destroy it, or let it fall into corporate hands. Those are the stakes, Drake confirmed. And we don't have much time. The dimensional anomaly is intensifying. According to my calculations, we have a 72-hour window of optimal conditions before it begins to dissipate. Zoe made her decision. Let's get to work. What do we need to do? First, repair the damage to the Wanderer, Drake said, already moving toward the ship. Then, complete the final calibrations to the dimensional resonance array. Nova will need to run the activation algorithms. And after that, Zoe asked. Drake smiled for the first time, a genuine expression of excitement that reminded her of her uncle. After that, we make history. We open a door no human has ever walked through before. As they boarded the Wanderer together, Zoe couldn't shake the feeling that her inheritance was about to change everything, not just for her, but potentially for all of humanity.